My Brother, the Other. The dedication of my book reads, "In memory of my brother Stephen, for all his othering." There was nobody quite like my brother. He reached out to people far beyond our ken and gathered them into his tribe. People like Stephen Lohr, his brilliant wheelchair-bound friend who was stricken with cystic fibrosis. Louis Mofsey, his Indian friend who could dance with 16 hoops. And Mary Fasthorse, his adopted Sioux mother, a wise and saintly old woman. Because of his unique gifts, he taught me to recognize my own giftedness. His love for people and expansive worldview became the template for the work I now do as the host of Here on Earth, Radio Without Borders, a public radio program premised on the idea that there is really only one race, the one we call human. My brother Stephen died of lung cancer on June the 29th, the feast of St. Peter and St. Paul. To watch somebody with a life force that verged on the diabolic reduced to a box of ashes overnight was a shock. I am grieving. He had started smoking at the age of 11. Butts he picked up in the street, unfiltered Pall Malls, then regular Chesterfields, and finally Marlboros, which he consumed 2 or 3 packs at a time. He never stopped, not even after throat cancer and 2 operations. He was deeply addicted. Ours was an Italian-American family rooted in the Bronx. But for some mysterious reason, Stephen became completely identified with Indians from the moment my mother showed him a picture of a Plains Indian warrior on horseback when he was 5. As my brother got older, his psyche became a battleground where the Indian wars were never settled. He became more and more difficult as he grew older, flying off the handle at the slightest provocation. We learned to live with him the way the Neapolitans lived with Vesuvius, never knowing from one minute to the next just when he might blow. He worshipped Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, Lorenzo de' Medici, and Mussolini. He preached benign dictatorship and practiced a form of petty tyranny at home. He was never any good at anything that mattered, his daughter once said of him. A great artifaker was what he called himself, speaking of his uncanny ability to recreate Indian artifacts. But really the same was true of his own makeup. Only a very few of us could see through his bluff. Steve is like America, his friend Cesare once said. Love him or leave him. His wife left him. His children left him. But I always adored him, and so did my 2 sons. He was my big brother by 10 years, always defending and protecting me in family quarrels and street scuffles. When I was a kid, he carved me a child's bow and arrows from an ash tree sapling he had cut down in Van Cortlandt Park. Yippee, his hunting dog, an English fox terrier, very smart, used to follow him into the park to hunt rabbits and squirrels. He taught me to shoot into the bullseye of a target he nailed into one of the oak trees in our backyard in Riverdale. He taught me how to do the deer dance and insisted that I practice every day when I came home from school, running upstairs to his room to seek him out. He was a tough and exacting first teacher who instilled in me the same standards of excellence to which he himself scrupulously adhered. We performed in minstrel shows together, while he beat out the rhythm on one of his hand-stretched drums and sang in a high nasal voice, Indian style. I danced the deer dance, all decked out as an Indian brave, in a costume he had conjured out of ribbons, beads, and turkey feathers. I was supposed to shake a rattle in my right hand while fluttering a turkey feather fan in my left. That took some doing. I don't think I ever got it right. We performed this brother and sister act many times together on stages and auditoriums throughout the Bronx until I finally got too big to be passed off as an Indian brave. What a lucky bastard he was when I think about it. To live your whole life as a prodigal and a reprobate, only to die like a saint. He really did look like one of the Desert Fathers when we walked into his hospital room and found him swaddled in nothing but a sweaty sheet. He had always been afraid he would die alone. Yet there he was, surrounded by his tribe, sisters, daughters, sons, lovers, friends of every hue and stripe, his family reunited. I remember how he had hooked a rug from nails on a spool when he was a boy, lifting off the thread from each nail head until the hank grew to a fantastic length, 1/4 mile or more, as the story was told. And here he was, hooking the rug of his life off the spool, 1 stitch at a time, while the hank went on disappearing slowly down the hole. I had never before realized how each of us has just so many breaths, a finite number, an allotment assigned to us, like the number you get in a bakery or a butcher's shop. And the more we use them up, the more each one of these breaths becomes a thing unto itself, discrete as a shaped note. In, out, all through his last night on earth. Nothing to suggest that the end was near. No faltering, no stumble, no slowing down at all. And then it stopped. I felt like a diver who had just let go of the boat. I looked at the clock. 10 minutes to 6. He took one last half breath. When the nurse came in, she was just as surprised as we were that the end had come. She checked his pulse, looked up at us, and said, "He was a brilliant warrior." My son Dominic shaved him. Together we removed his hospital gown. I washed his hands and feet, taking liberties with my brother's body I never would have dreamed of taking while he was alive. All the while, he was giving off heat in waves that kept rising off his forehead, as if it were coming from some deep source, like coal compressed under many layers, buried in his core. His heat was purgative, erasing all traces of the anguish and torment that had characterized his last days, his whole life, in fact. In their place, a deep peace came to settle into him, like a great stone that had finally found its groove. It seemed to suggest that his suffering, the very cruciform of his life, had been redemptive after all. The work was unfinished, but the man was complete.